Welcome back to another episode of Ready or Not. Today we're getting into a very unique topic, and that is the topic of adoption. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back. We are together again with Nate. You guys have met him on previous episodes, but he was actually bringing up this wonderful topic of adoption. And I'm sure most of the world at least goes to a particular idea or concept or stigma or something, maybe for many an experience. But what even in your heart and your mind led you to this very topic?
The privilege of having adopted 5 kids.
Yep, you were pretty well acquainted with the concept.
Yeah, absolutely. We worked in social services for a while. We worked in a foster family agency. And so we've got to see both sides of it. We worked in it, and that was kind of a cool thing. But then we had the privilege of adopting our kids as well. And I'll tell you what, working on one side of it and then being involved on the other side of it are 2 totally different things. One is theory, and then the other one is rubber meets the road.
So that's pretty fascinating and insightful. You're saying on the working side, being involved, you have concepts, you have rules, you have the role that you play.
Yes.
But as a father of adopted children, it is a completely different experience.
Completely different experience.
Was that shocking?
It was shocking. Initially, we started off with our first daughter, and that was awesome. It was great. The experience was intense because, you're dealing with the government. And so that was a little bit hard. But our daughter, the experience was amazing. And before we actually adopted the rest of our kids.
And you have
5.
5, yep.
So after we adopted our daughter, I was like, I don't do this anymore, Lord. And God's like, oh, really? You want to do this anymore? And then obviously God had better ideas for our family, and we had an opportunity to adopt again. And the process the second time around was through a little different type of situation. We went through the county of Los Angeles, and the county of Los Angeles is a little bit harder to deal with, I think.
Yeah, to say the least, right?
To say the least. So the privilege, we got to adopt all 5 of our kids over time. The story's kind of a pretty long one, but a pretty amazing one. And one of the things that I realized as a Christian, having adopted kids, it kind of gave me a better perspective of my relationship with Jesus Christ, how we were grafted in, Ephesians 1 verses 5, into God's family and what that looks like. And it's been like raising any child, whether it's biologically yours or otherwise. There's work involved.
Sure,
in it.
That's a great point.
You
it's
know?
not just a vacation or a visit.
It's not right. And the honeymoon period is very short. It does not last very long. And so it's just roll up your sleeves and get to work.
And so for you guys, did you set out, was there a day where you were like, you know what, honey, let's start praying about adoption? Did it jump you kind of unexpectedly? I know there's 100 different paths into this world of adoption and family. But for you guys, was it intentional? Did you set out to do this, or did it kind of surprise you and just take over all of a sudden?
It surprised us and took over all of a sudden.
So explain that in like 30 seconds, a short version.
Short version, our intent was to go to the mission field. Actually, Horizon Christian Fellowship out in Macau, China. We're going to go do missions. We were married 6 years, didn't have any kids. So we're like, okay, God must want us to go do missions, which seemed like the right idea. And the God's like, oh, I have missions for you to do.
Sure.
But not overseas. It's going to be in your house, which, by the way, is not exclusive to just adoption. We do missions in our home every day.
Sure.
The first people that we ever witness to is our family. They'll know whether we love Jesus or not. Right
Yep.
away, so
I remember the church I want to say grew up in. I didn't really start attending church till I was 19, but church grew up in through every door. When you walked out of the sanctuary, the office, I even think the restrooms maybe, but whatever door you walked through, that is huge sticker above the top that said, through these doors, you enter the missions field.
Yeah.
And it was just this reminder that wherever you're going, you are on mission for sure.
Yeah.
Now, adoption's unique for a lot of different reasons, but even biblically, we are almost, I believe, mandated to be involved in the process of adoption.
Absolutely.
Now, whether that's supporting, whether that's praying, whether that's actually doing, and I know you have some very interesting statistics as to if churches got more involved in adoption.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite passages in the Old Testament says that not only were you to be a defender of the defenseless, but then a father to the fatherless, or some translations say the father to the forgotten.
Yep.
And there's this idea to step into the world of those who don't have what's natural, and bring them into your life in a natural way.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a beautiful thing. So one of the things that you learned as you study child development is that the child will gaze into your face and look at you, and they'll pick up things that you do that you don't even know that you do with your face, and they'll start doing the same thing. And we have our oldest daughter, especially, will have it where people are like, oh my goodness, she looks just like your wife. She looks just like you. There's, oh my goodness, that's your smile. People don't know in some cases that she's adopted. But what's really interesting, same as we gaze into the face of our Savior, we look more and more like him. And then over time, you see more of him than you do of us. It's kind of an incredible thing. And so I've learned more about my relationship with Jesus based on the fact that I've adopted our children. It's pretty incredible. And by the way, it's a very Judeo-Christian thing to do.
That's probably very, very true. And I love this. I don't think I've ever told you this because it doesn't really matter. But as long as we've known you, right? We knew you pre-adoption.
Oh, yeah.
Our paths have so interestingly intertwined. But I'm very aware that your kids are adopted and not biological, and yet I forget almost always, even though the skin tone is so varied. I mean, you guys walking through a door is fantastic. I love it. But I watched Noah, your son, and I'm like, dude, he's just like Nate. And your mom told you the same thing the other day.
And it's a crazy thing. I didn't think so.
Yep.
But my mom's like, no, you did the same things. I was like, I did not. She says, yes, you did.
Yep.
God knows.
Or even your daughters sometimes remind me of different attributes you have, or your wife's just joy and excitement and passion. Is like, this is a family like I've never seen before in the deepest, realest way. So adoption, right? There's the impression people get, and then there's the experience you have. The hardships or unexpectedness, and I don't equate this to be the same thing at all. My wife and I fostered for a couple years and was shocked at what happens behind closed doors, right? Absolutely. Because there is adjustment. You don't really usually have 9 months to kind of prepare and think.
That's right.
It kind of happens quick.
Yeah.
So it just shakes things up. People have opinions as to how you should be and what you should do, but they don't understand what's going on at bedtime or in the middle of the day.
Yep.
And so it was very eye-opening, the amount of mercy and grace that was needed. And then as you connected it earlier, the longer we look into Scripture and get to know the attributes of God, we become more like him.
Yes.
The longer was around that fostering opportunity, the more I realized that grace and mercy were needed. And it softened my heart for those who have adopted or are fostering. To grace and mercy, man, they are figuring it out, and they're absolutely doing their best to represent Christ in ways that you don't understand.
That's so true.
Gosh, this has been true for too long. By now, it should have been solved. But what is this, statistically speaking, if churches got involved? And when I say churches, I don't mean a pastor walks into a meeting and says, we're going to start an adoption campaign. I mean the church, the people, the families that attend that congregation. What is that statistic?
It's kind of a crazy statistic, and Focus on the Family gave this statistic some years ago, actually prior to us adopting again. We heard it, in which this was a cause for us going back into foster care.
So you'd already adopted your first.
Yeah, and we're like, I'm done. Oh, well, we. When I say we, I mean me.
Yeah.
I'm done. We're not doing this anymore. This is very difficult. You know, the state is in your home and telling you how to do things. I don't like this. And then God was like, I say when you're done. And so I heard the statistic that like just punched me in the heart. And it's if one family out of every third church adopted one child, there'd be no more kids in the system unless by choice.
Say that one more time.
If one family out of every third church, so that's not every church, that's not every family, would adopt one child, there'd be no more kids in the system unless by choice.
Unbelievable.
That's crazy. Which, by the way, amounts to about 2%, a little less than 2% of Christians in America.
To have 2% of believers. And that's not even church-going believers.
Yes.
Right? So it's probably like 1% or 1.5%
Yep. It's crazy.
of Christians across the country
Yeah.
would adopt a child. there would be no foster care system.
There, no need for it. But when you think about it, pre-Child Protective Services, pre-social services, there was the church.
Yep.
And so if we get back to doing what we did before, there wouldn't be this issue. And I think, we always talk as Christians about having influence. I want influence. Well, not everybody has a pulpit. Not everybody has a podcast. So how do you gain influence? Well, I'm happy you asked.
Yeah.
Open your home. If you have an available room, if you have the facilities to be able to house a child, imagine what you'll do, because you change the trajectory of their life altogether. We've fostered for short periods of time. There's a little boy that we fostered for about 10 months.
I remember this.
And yeah, Jason, awesome little boy, loved this kid, thought we were going to be able to adopt him, but it didn't work out that way. He ended up being placed with a sibling. And when he first came into our home, he was playing with Barbies and stuff. And I was like, nope.
Right.
Went to Walmart and got some G.I. Joes.
See, I believe, and that's what I have viewed parenting from the moment we had our first kid. There's something that happened in my mind, an understanding, I think it was from the Lord. This is not just a parent-child relationship. This is an 18-year discipleship program.
Yes.
Right? And you get to be his dad, but the mission is to disciple him.
That's right.
I know, and we'll come back. We're going to continue this conversation, but there's some resources out there. I know that as you've partnered, we, the church, it's funny, Nate and Nate are kind of co-doing Love Life, which is not only helping mothers and fathers of unexpected or unwanted pregnancies, but they're beginning to really look into leaning towards helping families adopt and find resources. So we'll come back and pick this topic up in just a minute here. But as we move along, start praying. A, what does it mean that you are adopted as a child of God? And B, would the Lord maybe be calling you to adopt someone?